guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to spend some time with me today. Got a good one for y'all today. This is one of those videos, guys, that is going to help you out in the long term big time. It's not one of those quick fix type deals. It's something that if you utilize it in your fishing, it's going to help you guys incrementally, increase your success every single trip you go out. And that is how to find in obvious spots on the lake, because anymore it's like everybody is so good and the information is so accessible to everybody, and there's been so many tournaments and we've been fishing for so long that a lot of times everything's a community hole. Everybody knows all the good spots. But I'm going to tell you guys how to identify some areas that get overlooked in today's episode. I think it's really going to help you guys out. Also, guys, for get started, a couple quick our daily housekeeping tips. Just want to invite everybody to please swing by and check out all the 20% off sales that Tackle Warehouse has got going on for the summer. I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description if you guys would like to use that link. It's a good way to support the channel here and get you some good deals on tackle. And also, guys, real quick, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, you can do that by going to my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, and just shoot me a private message. I'll get you the details, so I really appreciate that. Okay, one of the things that I can't stand in fishing is I can't stand to fish around anybody. My ideal fishing day is to never see another person, never see another boat, never hear another sound of civilization. I want peace and quiet and to be completely alone. And needless to say, that's hard to find. There's very few lakes in the country that you can do that. And moreover, it's very hard to find any type of areas, especially on a public body of water, that do not get fished. It's like with GPS and all the mapping technology we have right now, there's no secrets in terms of, finding those offshore places, and all the shallow water places are pretty obvious. So let me tell you a technique about how you can locate some of the off the wall, inobvious type areas on a lake. One of the things that you have to do, be very aware of how people perceive a lake when they're running down a lake. Because normally, let's say for example, that you take out from your launch ramp where you put your boat in, and maybe you have a spot 4 or 5 miles down the lake that you want to fish. A lot of people, when they run to those places, they tend to maybe cut corners and maybe stay on one side of the lake. They don't swing out way out wide of the lake. They sort of, stay closer to the bank, and they run a certain route. And when you do that, there's a lot of what I call blind spots in fishing, places that get overlooked. So let's say, for example, that you've got a lake and you've got a spot 5 miles up the lake. And throughout this particular run up there, you've got to go around some bends and some curves and all that type of deal. If you launch at a public launch facility where a lot of people do, you got to realize that the way that you run up that lake is how most people run up the lake. They're not, say for example, if there's a sharp left-hand turn that you have to make, on the lake, running up the lake, most people are going to try to cut, closer to the bank. They're not going to run all the way to the other side of the lake and then make a turn. This is the blind spot I'm talking about, because when people are running down the lake, they ignore areas like that. So for example, if you're running down the lake and the lake bends sharp to the left like that, everything on your left-hand side gets a lot of attention because you're closer to the bank. Everything on the opposite side of the lake, on the right-hand side, does not get much attention because it's too far over there. You're not swinging wide to get to those particular areas. So when you're running down a lake and you're looking to find good areas on the lake, keep this in mind. Keep in mind, where is the part of the lake when you're running down the lake that people are not going close to with their boat? And this is one of the first areas I look for. If you're running 20 miles up the lake and you have a lake that sort of bends and turns a little bit, there's literally dozens of areas on the opposite side of the lake from where you're fishing that do not get the attention as the side that you're on. Now, this is very important on places where you have larger boat ramps, because if you've got a lake that has a bunch of small boat ramps everywhere, it's not that big of a deal. But if you've got a large ramp where a lot of people launch out of, which most big lakes, that there's 2 or 3 major ramps on a lake, so keep that in mind. That's a really big deal. The next thing, an obvious spot that you need to look for in terms of visible bank fishing, are areas that don't have good looking structure on it. You know, areas that have like a lot of boat docks or a lot of lay down trees or a lot of good looking rocky banks or rocky points, they attract a lot of attention. But if you go to the lakes and you look at certain parts of the lake that don't have much to it, like say for example they're a flatter bank that don't have, there's not much feature on it, there's not any cover on it, a lot of times those fish will gravitate towards those nothing looking banks simply to get away from the fishing pressure. There may not be as many fish there, but it's an overlooked area. And one of my favorite things to do is like what I call junk fishing a nothing looking spot. So let's say for example you're running down the lake and you've got this nothing looking banks that you're running down, these banks that don't look very good. There's not much cover on them. They may be flatter. There may be like one lay down tree in the water, or there may be one boat dock, or there may be one little patch of lily pads or something like that, that most people are going to say, I'm not going to waste my time pulling over to fish one boat dock, or I'm not going to waste my time to run over there on that bank over there to fish one log, or a little, patch that's got 2 or 3 lily pads on it. This is the areas that get overlooked that you want to take advantage of. And you can actually make a pattern. I call this junk fishing, and you can actually make a pattern out of it where you can just run down the lake and pick apart places where you think there's one bass. There may not be a group of fish there, but there may be one bass there. And so there's been some anglers that have very successful careers by just junk fishing like that. So that's another thing I look for. The next area I look for, guys, which is my favorite, are those hard to access areas. And my favorite inobvious type area are places like in the back end of a creek that have a lot of siltation going in. A lot of these places in the back of those creeks out there, over the years, there's been so much silt that has run through the system that the old original creek channels may be filled in. But if you can get over that flat area, which I call the silt line, a lot of times the old creek channel is still intact way back up in there, and they're full of fish. I've done super good and won tournaments for years on this type of a thing. So this is another type of thing that you want to look for. Look on your map and find areas where you can see the creek on the map going way back up in there. And if you get in the back of these areas and it gets super, super shallow, try to just idle across there and find out some route that you can maybe access to get back in there. Most people don't want to fight about that. They don't want to go to that effort. And that's one of the things to remember in bass fishing, guys, is realize that most people are a little bit lazy, and they don't want to go out of their way to hit some place that may just produce one bite. But that's a good way to do well on lakes that get a lot of fishing pressure. So anyway, guys, hope it helps you out, and we'll talk later.